here it is. Okay, this is the new stuff. So last week we finished up the Baruch Shem Kavod, which comes after the Shema, and the final letter, which normally the final letter is Tav, but then we put the Nun at the end. And as we've talked about, the Nun has to do with impermanence. And the piece that we sing, V'nachnu nevarech Yah me'ata v'ad olam hallelujah, which comes at the end of the Ashrei, is like a blessing of the eternal, putting our attention on that which is eternal instead of bumming out about the temporal. And so there's then a prayer of humility, kind of a humble supplication, which comes at this point, which is in the spirit of that letter Nun. And I open it, Ribbon Kol HaOlamim, Master of all worlds. And we sing this prayer, which means, not upon our own merit do we cast our supplications before you, but upon your abundant compassion. So we're entering into that kind of humble place. I'm going to sing it a little bit. This is not the melody we were just learning. That's a different one. But it's not too difficult. It goes, Lo al tzid koteinu, Anachnu mapilim tachanuneinu. Let's try just that. Lo al tzid koteinu, Anachnu mapilim tachanuneinu. And I'll sing the next part. Ki al rachamecha harabim. Let's try that together. Lefanecha ki al rachamecha harabim. So this spirit of this is like humble, like not because of our own goodness do we cast our supplications, but then it turns around. Then the spirit of it turns around, because then it says, Aval anachnu amcha b'nei v'ritecha. Nevertheless, we are the children of your covenant, which is a very kind of, traditional Torah way of phrasing it. But you can also think of it as, look, we're nothing, but we're also part of the divine. We're also God incarnate. That's another way of saying it. And then we begin the Ve'ahavta, which is of course, the Ve'ahavta coming after the Shema. But Ve'ahavta is itself a mitzvah. In other words, it's a practice to direct the heart to the divine. That's why whenever you probably remember when I'm leading the Shema meditation, I always say at this point, directing the heart to the divine, because it's taking on that mitzvah of Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. And so I say the formula here, Hareini mikabel alai mitzvata seichel. I accept upon myself the mitzvah to practice, and then we all chant, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. Now the next passage that's coming up is something that it mentions the three biblical archetypes which correspond to Chesed and Gevurah and Tiferet on the Tree of Life, and also correspond to the three portals that we do, the three portals of presence, the heart, the body, and then consciousness itself. Now the three portals are not only Chesed and Gevurah and Tiferet, they're more broad than that. They're more general. It's like breaking down the entire tree into three categories, but nevertheless they can be thought of as symbolized by those three sphirot. So each of these little passages that I'll be chanting is an invocation of one of those biblical characters, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So this is all a continuation of the text that began here. Nevertheless, we are children of your covenant. We are the children of Abraham, your beloved, whom you swore on Mount Moriah. And that's in reference to the story in the Torah where Hashem tells Abraham that he will be, his descendants will be like the grains of sand of the seashore and so on. And so at that point, after I chant the invocation of Abraham, we bring the right hand to the heart, and we say the first part of that three-part formula, Bechol Avavcha, with all your heart, and then we can chant Lecha, as we always do, offering awareness to the moment. Then we come to Isaac, who represents Gevura, restriction. That means bringing awareness into the body. Zera Yitzchak Yechido Shene'ekad Agabe HaMezbeach. Okay, I'm seeing a typo because there's no reason for that to be capitalized. So, the seed of Yitzchak, unique one who is bound atop the altar. The story of Yitzchak being bound on the altar, if you remember, Abraham is told to sacrifice Isaac. And so he's about to do it. And then at the last moment, the angel says, no, don't kill your son. That's bad. It's bad to kill your son. Don't do that. But nevertheless, his willingness to sacrifice Isaac, because Isaac is called, as it says here, Yechido, which comes from the word, the same root as Echad, which means one. Sometimes it's translated as only son, but it's not really that. It's more like unique, which is why I put the word unique here. It's like Isaac was his special one that he would want to sacrifice the least. And so the fact that he's bound on the altar represents that quality of Gevura, which is restriction. He's bound. He's ne'ekad al gabe hamizbeach. And that's why we bring awareness into the body, meaning we're constraining our awareness and concentrating it in the body. And we say uvachol nafshecha, the second part of the three-part formula of the Ve'ahavta. And then we chant Na'aseh, which we do in the most basic practice, bringing awareness into the body. And then finally the invocation of Jacob, Adat Yaakov Bincha Bechorecha, the community of Jacob, your firstborn. So now it's expanding out. It's not just an invocation of those guys, but it's recognizing like we are the community. It's another way of saying that we're part of Israel, part of Yisrael, the people Yisrael. So it says, because of your love and joyous delight, you named him Yisrael and Yishrun. So Yishrun is another name for Jacob that appears in certain parts of the Tanakh. And it's actually from this name that we get the teaching about Yisrael, meaning straight to God, because Yisrael in the Torah, actually, the way it describes it, it says Sarita El, which can mean wrestles with God, or it can mean strives for God, but it has a connotation of a little bit of a struggle, or reaching for something. Whereas Yeshurun comes from the root which is Yashar, which means straight, complete, like right there, like there's no struggling. It's just straight to God. And so that word is kind of in some of the teachings is applied to this too in a creative way, even though that's not really the root, but it sounds similar. So people, many texts refer to that. Okay, and then finally, so then we say the final part of the formula, uvechol meodecha, with all of your expansiveness, and we come into the recognition of the field of awareness, and we say v'nishma. Then I have here the chanting of the rest of the Ve'ahavta, Ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele. And I'll chant this. If you know this, of course, feel free to chant along with me. And then we come back to the prayer text. Lefichach, therefore it's upon us to thank you, praise you, glorify you, bless you, sanctify, and offer praise and thanks to your name. And that brings us into the silent meditation, to chanting Atahu, Atyahi. and then we come into silent meditation. Now, when we come out of silent meditation, this is all going to be new. This is the passage that says the Atahu 4 times. This is all from the morning blessings, by the way. Atahu achelo nivra olam, Atahu mishe nivra olam, Atahu ba'olam hazeh, Atahu ba'olam haba. You are the divine before the world was created, since the world was created, this world and in the world to come. Sanctify your name upon those who hallow your name. And I'm just skipping down. Blessed is the one whose name is sanctified by the many. And then we have an Amen. This is the final of the morning, the very last morning blessing. Baruch HaMakadesh Shemo Barabim. Now, I mentioned there are different versions of the Jewish prayers, and the Siddur that I asked people to get. I mean, I didn't request that everyone get it, but when people ask what they should get, this is what I've been answering, which is the Art Scroll Nusach Ashkenaz. And the reason I say Ashkenaz is really because most of the prayers are a little bit shorter and more simple in the Ashkenaz version, and it's the version that's used by the majority of synagogues in this country. So if you're familiar with that more, it's much more likely as you learn things that you'll be more comfortable in wherever you go. It's the other nusach called Sephard is not Sephardic. It's called Sephard because it borrows from Sephardic, but it's actually the Hasidic nusach, and it has many Kabbalistic passages which are really wonderful, and ultimately, if you really want to get into it, you should just get both of them. But most of the time I'm using the Ashkenaz that I'm putting in this practice, but this is one of the exceptions because I really liked this, the way it says it in the Sephard here. In the Ashkenaz, it actually says the standard formula. It says, Baruch atah Adonai HaMakadesh Shemo Barabim. And I don't know, there's just something about this, the conciseness of this version as the conclusion, as the final blessing that strikes me in a certain way. So that's what I used. But it could be either one. We say Amen, and then we sing this little chant here. Actually, no, this is not singing a chant. This is just chanting a chant. And each of these lines are chanted 3 times. And I'm going to demonstrate it, and I think that you'll catch on as I'm doing it. So just see if you can sing along when you start catching on. It's a very simple thing that's going to use just one note, and then coming down to the 7, and the flat 2. Each line is 3 times, but the third time for each line will be slightly different melody. Adonai tzevot imanu miskav lanu Eloi Yaakov Selah. Adonai tzevot imanu miskav lanu Eloi Yaakov Selah. Adonai tzevot imanu miskav lanu Eloi Yaakov Selah. Adonai tzevot ashrei adam boteach bach. Adonai tzevot ashrei adam boteach bach. Adonai tzevot ashrei adam boteach bach. Adonai Hoshia melech yaneinu v'yom kareinu. Adonai Hoshia melech yaneinu v'yom kareinu. Adonai Hoshia hamelech yaneinu v'yom kareinu. Then we come to the melody that we began with today. You are my shelter from distress, you preserve me. With glad song of rescue, you envelop me, Selah. Let Adonai be pleased with the offerings of Judah and Jerusalem, as in days of old and in earlier years. It goes like this. Ata seteli mitzati tzveni Ranei falet תסובבני סלע, וערבה לאדוני מנחת יהודה וירושלים. כי מעולם וקשנים קדמוניות. Let's try it one more time. אתה עשית לי מצר תצלני לנפלת תסובבני סלע, וערבה לאדוני מנחת יהודה וירושלים. כי מעולם וקשנים קדמוניות. And then we conclude the entire practice with the Ana Bekoach prayer, which you may be familiar with if you come to our Friday night Shabbat services. We always do an Ana Bekoach, or it's really pronounced, the word is koach, but in the context of the prayer it's choach. And what I've done here, you can see it says Chazan and Kahal in bold-faced. So what I'd like you to do is to chant the first word. So you'll chant Ana, and just sustain it, and I'll sing the other words. We could even do this maybe together. Rahmana, you want to give it a try?
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll sing Ana. If that's actually, I know last time we had to change keys.
I'll go high. Ana.
Here, we can do a little lower for you. How about this? Ana. Okay, go ahead. Go for it.
Ana.
Yehoach gedulat yamincha tatir tzarura.
Kabel.
Inat amcha sagvenu tarenu nora. Gibor doshe yehudecha kevavat shomrem.
Barchem.
Tarem rachamem tzidkatecha tamid gamlem. Kadosh berov tuvecha nahel adatecha.
Yachi.
Ge'el amcha penei zochre kedushatecha.
Kavatenu.
Kabel ushema tzakatenu yodea talumot. Shem kavod malchuto leolam vaed. And that's it. That's the complete practice. So I'd love to go through this whole thing with you. As we do it, I didn't show you, I didn't show you everything. There's a lot we can talk about with each of the prayers. But I'm thinking that as these Wednesday nights go on, we'll visit little pieces of it and we'll go into more depth. That way we can grok the gestalt of the whole thing more quickly and start practicing it. Does anybody have any questions or anything before we jump into it? Yes, Ruth.
I had one very little question. In the parts with Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, in the Yaakov part, it called him the firstborn. So referring to, it said, I don't know, the translation said your firstborn.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's look at that for a minute. Right, it calls him Bincha Bechorecha, the firstborn. Here it is. So that's interesting. I'm not sure the history of that. It's a common phrase to call Jacob that. But why is Jacob called that? I don't know. If any of you know, then you can unmute and tell us. My guess is that it comes from, it's probably a play on two different things, because Jacob, as we know in the story, was not the firstborn. He was the secondborn. But the story is that he usurps the place of the firstborn, and in a way that has to happen in the Torah. In the stories of the Torah, that happens many times, where there's a playing with the firstborn. Like, for example, the children of Yosef are Ephraim and Menashe. I get confused which one's first and second. I think really it's Menashe and Ephraim. That's the actual order. But then Jacob switches his hands and changes it to Ephraim and Menashe, and that's how we do the traditional blessing on Friday nights for the kids. So there's all this playing with firstborn, and so there's the use of that term in a way that's deliberately not literal, but is implying something special. And I know that the children of Israel are also called like the firstborn in various prayers, like the people, out of all the peoples, Israel's the first one. But we know, of course, Israel's not the firstborn out of all the peoples at all. the people of Israel don't really exist till very late in the biblical history. You go many generations before you get to them. So my thought is that it's probably playing with that idea in a certain way that makes sense to the liturgical biblical mind, but I'm just speculating.
In the Aramaic studies that I've done,
Yeah.
the term for firstborn has to do with the one that takes on the work of the father, or the God.
Interesting.
That's the firstborn. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That makes sense. What?
No, I just said thank you. That makes sense. I was saying the same thing. It makes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So
I think it was in the little prayer after the Tzadi. I have trouble with calling people evil. I understand people behave in a way that can be seen as evil.
the
there's-
Rishaim.
What? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's two places where they're described as evil people, and I squirm at the term.
Yeah, I relate to that squirming as well. The way I understand these kinds of things, it's common in the biblical language and in the traditional prayer language to say stuff like that. I think of it as, actually, it's this. There's an interesting piece I want to bring out here. In the Talmud, there's a story of a rabbi, and I can't remember the name of it, because it's in my memory, but I didn't prepare. It's just striking me what you're saying now. There's a story where there's a rabbi who has these neighbors that torment him. They're making fun of him, and they're like, it's from the language of it, it sounds like they're mocking him for being pious, for being religious. And so he gets so angry that he is about to pronounce a curse to that they should die, something like that. And his wife comes and says, why are you doing that? That's not proper. You shouldn't make a curse that someone's going to die. And he gives some kind of proof text from the Psalms to show that it's okay. And it's like this line. It's either this line or a line that's similar to it, where it says, "Harashaim yashmid," the wicked shall be destroyed. And then she brings another verse, and I'll look it up later. But whatever the other verse is, shows that it's not that the wicked should be destroyed, but rather that wickedness should be destroyed. And that person who's tormenting you should do tshuva, that they should be transformed. And then it says he learned from his wife at that point that that it was not proper to curse people, and instead he prayed that they did tshuva, and he did make the prayer, and they did do tshuva. It's a really good story, because it's like it's a story that's applicable to this kind of language that comes up for people a lot. So I retranslate it when I read these kinds of things. Even in the Amidah, there's a whole bracha about, the slanderers and the this and the that, that they should be wiped out and so on. But it's really we can re-understand it to be the transformation of the people that are captivated by those kinds of impulses and so on. Okay, let's do it, yeah? Okay. And just taking a moment to bring your body into a meditative posture, relaxed but alert. Bringing to mind that here we are, exactly, completely connected to the oneness of all being that is inherent in all things and all experience and all levels. One reality, the crown of existence. Bringing awareness to the top of your head as a sphere of white light at the crown. Achad, and we all chant. Ruach Elohim Chaim. Hu Eloheinu Eino. Yigdal Elohim Chai v'yishtabach. Nitzav Einetel Metziuto. Echad ve'en yachid ki yichudo. Ne'elam ve'gam en sof le'achduto. And invoking the Aleph above the head, open to joy and sorrow as the one consciousness that I am, drawing the light down into the heart. Aro mimcha Elohai HaMelech v'avarcha shimcha le'olam va'ed. Ein lo demut haguf ve'eino guf lo naroch elav kedushato. Kadmon l'chol davar asher nivra rishon ve'en reshit lereshito. Bringing awareness down to the feet, perceptualizing Malchut manifesting at your feet, sphere of blue and earth colors. Your presence dwells as the essence of all things. Shtayim, and we chant Ruach me Ruach. Emet Malakeinu Efes Zulato. Hino Adon Olam Asher Malach Beterem Ko Yitzir Nivra Leit Nasa Vechefzo Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Hadarai Nai Nai Beyachare Kichlot HaKol Levado Imloch Nora Vehu Haya Vehu Hove Vehu Yeh Betifaram Vehu Echad Ve'en Sheni Laham Shelo Leachbira Beli Reshit Beli Tachlit Velo Haoz Ve'Hamisra Hananai Nai Nai Vehu Chai goali v'tzor chevli beit Sarah v'hunisi umanos li menat kosi b'yom ekra hananai nai nai biyado afkid ruchi be'etishan ve'aira bimruchi geviati Adonai li ve'lo ira. And invoking the letter Bet, welcoming your presence into this place. B'chol yom avechecha v'alela shimcha leolam va'ed. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ani berov chastecha vovetecha Eshtachave lechal kadshecha birotecha Adonai ahavti mon beitecha Umekom mishkan kevodecha Vani eshtachave vechra Evrecha lifnei Adonai osim Vani tefilati Lecha Adonai Ratzon Elohim berov chastecha Aneni be'emet yishecha. And bringing awareness to the right skull, invoking Chokhmah, filling and transcending all form. Shalosh, and we all chant Ma'i Meruach L'Shem Yichud Kudsha Brichu Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Asher Yatzar et Hadam B'Chokhmah Uvaravo Nekavim Nekavim Chalolim Chalolim.
Amen.
And invoking Gimel, complete and whole field of spaciousness. Gadol Adonai U'Mulam Ma'od V'Ligadulato En Chaker Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Shelo Hasani Aved.
Amen.
Invoking the sphere of Bina at the left skull. May our thoughts be wise and discerning. Arba Eshmei Mayim Ushechinte Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Asher Natan Lasek Vivina Lavchin Ben Yom Uvein Laila.
Amen.
Invoking the letter Dalet, may we recognize that all we have and all we are is your grace. Dor ledor Yeshabach Masecha Ugevoretechi Agidu Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam she'asa li kol tzarki.
Amen.
Bringing palms together, may this awareness express itself on all levels of my being. Kakatuv betorato, hareini mikabel, alai mitzvat aseh shel. V'yadata hayom, v'yadata hayom, v'yadata hayom, v'yadata hayom. B'tchilu achimu leyached Shem, Yod Heh, Bevav Heh, Beyichud Hashelim, B'Shem Kol Yisrael. And lifting the right hand, invoking Chesed, Sphira of silver and blue at your right shoulder, awaken within us your loving kindness. Chamesh Yahwa v'hashivot elavavecha. Hareini mikabel alai mitzvah aseh shel. We all chant. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Ata varata tayatzata tanafachta bi v'tameshamra bekirbi v'atati litla mimeni ulachazira bilati lavo. And visualizing the hay in your chest. May the words of our mouths and the expressions of our hearts serve you. Hadar kevodadecha v'divrei niflotecha asicha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, she'asani kirtzono.
Amen.
And Sphira of Gevura at the left shoulder, awaken within us inner strength to transcend all desires. Shesh Yahweh Ki Hashem Hu Ha-Elohim Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam Ozer Yisrael b'Gevura.
Amen.
Visualizing the Vav as your spine in the middle of the hay and then coming down into your belly. Awaken within us strength to embrace all that arises and not be caught by reactivity. Ve'ezus norotechi umeru gedulatecha sabarena. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam hanoten layayif koach.
Amen.
And bringing the right hand to your right hip, the Sphira of Netzach at your right hip, may we practice constantly Sheva Hayawa, invoking Zion, cutting through all distractions. Zecher Rav Tuvchayabiu V'tzidcha Techayeranenu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam Matir Asurim.
Amen.
Returning attention back to the sphere of Netzach, Bashamayim Mima'al, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, Hamechi mitzadei gaver.
Amen.
Invoking Hod at the left hip in humility and gratitude, Shmoneh Hawaya. Invoking Chet, staying with this moment as it is, neither attempting to change it nor fleeing from it. Chanun v'rachum Adonai, erech apayim u'gadal chesed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, zokef kefufim.
Amen.
Returning attention to the sphere of Hod ve'al haaretz mitachad, and we all chant Ein od kol zaman shehaneshama bekirbi. Modeh ani lefanecha, I give thanks before you, Adonai Elohai v'avotai v'motai ribon kol ha'ma'asim adon kol neshemot. Baruch atah Adonai hamachazir neshemot lifkarim metim.
Amen.
Bringing back the spirit of Tiferet and Yesod in the heart and in the lower belly. May we live in balance and serve you in joy. Teisha Waya. Invoking Tet, sensing your hidden goodness. Tov Adonai L'kol v'rachamav kol ma'asav. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam abisharumim.
Amen.
Bringing attention to Tiferet. Akein nekave lecha Adonai Eloheinu lirot mehere betiferet uzecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam pokeach ivrim.
Amen.
And bringing attention to Yesod. Letakein olam. Galui v'yadu lifnei chetzei chavodecha. Awareness back into your body, into your organs. She'im yipateach echad mehem, o yitzatem echad mehem, אי-אפשר לתקיים ולעמוד לפניך, ברוך אתה אדוני, רופא כל בשר ומפליא לעשות.
Amen.
And back to Malchut, Eser Waya. Visualizing the Yud now in your head, in pure simple awareness. Yoducha Adonai kol ma'asecha, v'chasidecha yevarchucha. Hareini mikabel et mitzvat aseh. And we all chant together. Tamim tiyeim Adonai Elohecha. Mish Yagor be'ohalecha mishkan behar kodshecha. Mi Yagor be'ohalecha mishkan behar kodshecha. Holech tamim, holech tamim, holech tamim. I may have to shut my window because there's dogs barking at the moment. Holech tamim to the window. Okay. Bringing attention to Malchut at the mouth. B'malchut Shaddai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Adonai panav eilecha v'chunecha. Yisa Adonai panav eilecha v'yasem lecha shalom. This passage I'm about to chant you have not seen before, but we'll talk about it later. Ashreinu matov chelkeinu, how good is our portion, umanaim goraleinu, how pleasant our destiny. Umayafa yerushatenu, ashreinu kashianu mashkimim uma'arivim, bavate chenesiot vavade midrashot umiyachidim shimcha b'chol yom tamid, v'yomrim pa'amayim be'ahava. Breathing in, filling the body with light. Invoking Kaf, fearlessly choosing presence. Kevod malachut chayomeru, kevorat chayadaberu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, Otel Yisrael b'tifara.
Amen.
Breathing in. Yisrael. Invoking Lamed, may we receive your teaching in every moment. Lahodia livnei adam gevorotav, uchavod adar malchuto. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And tracing circle number 1, breathing in. Yadonai. Invoking Mem, may we rest deeply purified through our merging with present reality. Malchut Techa Malchut Kol Olamim, Umemshaltecha Bechol Dor Vador. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tivanu al netilat yadayim.
Amen.
And breathing in. Eloheinu. Invoking Samech, may we remember that we are constantly supported by you on all levels. Somech Adonai lecho hanoflim v'zokef lecho hakafufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, rokach haaretz hamayim.
Amen.
And tracing the second circle, breathing in. Yadonai. Invoking the ayin, may we seek you constantly wherever we find ourselves. Einei chol alecha yasaberu v'yata natein lahem et echlam be'ito. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, hama'avir sheina me'einai et hanuma me'afapai.
Amen.
And breathing in. Echad. Invoking the letter Pei. May we taste the sweetness of your teaching. Poteach et yadecha, umaspir lecho chai ratzon. Ve'harev na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu ufi amacha beit Yisrael כולן יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה והערב נא אדוני אלוהינו את דברי תורתך בפינו ופי עמך בית ישראל כולן יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה ונהיה אנחנו וצאצאינו וצאצאימך בית ישראל כולן יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה ברוך אתה אדוני המלמד תורה לעמו ישראל. And bringing in light from the left, Baruch, invoking Tzadi, open us to trust you and live for you completely. Tzadik Adonai bechol derecha v'chatzi bechol ma'asav. Yehi ratzon, may it be your will. Lefanech Adonai Eloheinu v'yavoteinu v'imoteinu shetargilenu b'toratecha v'tabekenu b'mitzvotecha v'tivienu lo l'idei chet v'lo l'idei aver v'avon v'lo l'idei nisayon v'lo l'idei v'zayon v'al yishlo banu yetzer hara v'achikenu me'adam remecha v'era v'tabekenu b'yatzat tov v'ma'asim tovim v'chov et yisreinu lehishtabed lach.
Amen.
And bringing in light from the right, Shem, invoking the Kuf. May we receive the grace of your presence in the flow, ordinary flow of life. Karov Adonai l'chol karav l'chol esheku v'emet. Utenenu hayom, grant us this day and every day. Uv'chol yom. L'cheinu l'chesed urachamim be'einecha uveini choroinu v'tikim elenu chasadim tovim baruch ata Adonai gomer chasadim tovim le'amo Yisrael.
Amen.
And bringing in from the behind, Kivod, invoking the Reish. May we recognize the mystery that transcends all understanding. Ritzon, Yiriav Ya'aseh V'Shavatam Yishama V'Yoshiem. Ve'shit Chochma Yirat Hashem Seichel Tov Lechol Oseh Tehilato Omeret La'ad Baruch Shem Kivod. And bringing in light from the front, Malchuto, invoking Shin. May we be watchful to answer your call, and may you be watchful over us. Shomer Adonai et kol ohavav ve'et kol harishaim yashmid. May it be your will. Yehi ratzon v'fenech Adonai Elohai v'avotai v'motai shetatzileni. Rescue us. Hayom u'v'chol yom me'azei fanim u'me'azud panim me'adam ra me'chaver ra me'shochen ra me'pager ra mitzatan ha'mashchid midin kashe me'ba'al din kashe ben she u'ven brit u'ven she'enu u'ven brit.
Amen.
And invoking the letter Tav, grant us genuine sincerity, and may we live in the truth of our hearts. Tehilat Adonai yedaber pi v'yivorecho basar shem kodsho, bringing the light from below. Leolam yehe adam yirei shemayim beseter uvagalui. Umodei al ha'emet v'dover emet bilvavo v'yashkem v'nomar, bringing in light from above. Va'et invoking the Nun. We recognize that all comes from you, and to you all shall return. V'anachnu nevarech ya v'ad olam. Hallelujah. V'anachnu nevarech ya v'ad olam. Hallelujah. And we are going a little longer in this final class, by the way. Lo atzit koteinu, anachnu mapilim tachanuneinu. Lefanecha, ki arachamecha harabim. Lo atzit koteinu, anachnu mapilim tachanuneinu. Lefanecha, ki arachamecha harabim. Aval anachnu amcha b'nei veritecha, hareini mekabel alai mitzvat aseh. Let me chant. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'nei Avraham ohavcha shenishbata lo behar haMoriah. Let me chant. B'chol levavcha, offering awareness. Lecha Zera Yitzchak Yechido Shene'ekad HaGabe HaMizbeach Uvechol Nafshecha, filling the body with the light of awareness. Adat Yaakov bincha bechorecha, sheme'ahavatcha she'ahavta oto usimchatcha she'samachta bo, karata et shemo Yisrael vishurun, uvechol meodecha v'nishma. Kissing your fingers, relaxing your hands. V'hayu hadavarim ha'ele asher nochi metzavacha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha beveitecha v'lachtecha v'aderech uv'shach b'chav kumecha ukshartam la'ot hayadecha v'lutotafot bein einecha וכתבתם המזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. לפיכך אנחנו חייבים להודות לך, לשבחך ולפארך, ולברך ולקדש וליתן שבח והודיה לשמך. to chant inside, let's come into silence just for like 1 minute, and then we'll do the closing. Atahu ad shelo nivra haolam, Atahu mishenivra haolam, Atahu b'olam hazeh ve'atahu la'olam haba. Kadesh et shimcha makdishe shemecha, ve'kadesh et shimcha b'olamecha, u'v'tshuatecha tarim, v'tagbir konenu lemala. V'hoshienu, hoshienu, bekarov leman shemecha. Baruch hamekadesh shemo barabim.
Amen.
Adonai tzavot imanu miskav lanu lo Yaakov Selah. Adonai tzavot imanu miskav lanu lo Yaakov Selah. Adonai tzavot imanu miskav lanu lo Yaakov Selah. Adonai tzavot ashrei adam boteach bach. Adonai tzavot ashrei adam boteach bach. Adonai tzavot ashrei adam boteach bach. Adonai Hoshia melech yanenu v'yom korenu. Adonai Hoshia melech yanenu v'yom korenu. Adonai Hoshia melech yanenu v'yom korenu. Ata seiteli mitzat tzlini vanei falet tzoveveni selah ve'aval Adonai minchat Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. Ki me'olam ukshanim kadmoniot. And now perhaps, Rachmana, you could help me again, but we'll move a little lower.
Ana
B'choach gedulat yemincha tatir tzerura.
Ave
Rinat amcha sagvenu tarenu nora. Ibor doshe yechudecha chavavat shomrem. Bachem tarem rachamem tzidchatecha tamid gomlem. Chasin kadosh berov tuvecha nahel adatecha.
Yadchi
Ge'el amcha penei zochre kedushatecha.
Kavate
קבל ושמע צעקתנו יודע תלמוד
Baruch
שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. So take a nice little stretch. Take a nice deep breath. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.